Hello and welcome back to Gaming 101 with Mr. Berger. Now, tonight, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the upcoming balance changes. Now, these changes won't actually go into effect until tomorrow. So, today is January 23rd, 2018. By the time you are seeing this video, it might actually be the 24th. Either way, it's going to be the 24th when these balance changes officially go into effect. Now, first things first. Clash with Ash did an awesome video on these balance changes, so if you want to take a look at that, I'll try to get you a link here in the description and see if I can figure out a nice card or something up here in the corner and get a link to that video directly. I left him a couple nice comments. He took the time to reply. Definitely a great YouTuber. Would take the time to check him out. He's very helpful. Alright. So let's go ahead and jump into the cards that are getting changed here. Now you can see on my screen over here, you got about 8 of the cards that are definitely receiving direct changes. You're missing about 2 of them, the Lumberjack and the Mini P.E.K.K.A, but let's look at the full list, which is right below here. So here's everything that's going to be changed. So we're going to take a look at each card individually. I'll talk a little bit about each one, explain kind of what the changes mean, see if I can give a little bit of an input, and, talk about a couple direct card interactions if they apply, if I think that they might apply. So first things first, well, I guess this isn't the first thing anymore. This is like the second or third, but let's get into the card descriptions. Royal Ghost, that's the first card to be changed. Now, Royal Ghost is definitely an interesting card. Let's see if I can pull him up here on my screen, on my alternate tab, my alternate, what do we call it? A scene. Yeah, that's what they call it in OBS. Alright, here's the Royal Ghost. So basically, he turns invisible. He's got AoE splash damage, so he hits more than one unit with each swing. He only costs 3. He's relatively tanky. Not as tanky as a knight, I don't think. But he's definitely got a decent health pool. His most OP thing is that after he kills stuff, he turns back invisible. So he can kill something on defense and then float across the enemy's map, or the enemy's side of the map, rather, and go and smack their tower at least once or twice. If he's got more health left and they don't do anything to counter him, then he'll hit him even more than that. So he's really annoying, he's really powerful, so they definitely owed him a nerf. He needed this nerf. A lot of people have talked about how he's really OP. In fact, if you go and look at like TV Royale right now, or before the balance changes apply, or if you've looked at it in the last few days or weeks since he was released, look at the max arena, the highest arena. I think it's 12 now is the highest arena, right? You'll see that a ton of decks use him. Almost every single one. Yes, Legendary Arena is level 12 now. So look at the level 12 Legendary Arena replays. I guess it's not level 12. It's Arena 12, right? Arena 12 Legendary Arena replays. You'll see that Royal Ghost is all over the place right now. So he's going to receive a nerf. Very much needed. What exactly are they going to do to him? Damage minus 6%? Well, that's a pretty easy go-in, or self-descriptive direct nerf. He's going to be weaker. He's not going to do as much damage. Here's the most interesting and the biggest change. The invisibility delays goes from 0.7 seconds to 1.2 seconds. What exactly does that mean? It means that after he turns invisible again, or before, rather, he turns invisible again, it'll take him longer to do so. So he kills a unit. Before, it'd only take him 0.7 seconds to turn invisible again. Now, it'll take him a full 1.2 seconds, which is almost double. I mean, I know that those numbers don't sound too scary or too huge, but it's almost double. Okay, so that was the Royal Ghost. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next card here, and that is going to be the Zappies. Now, I can't pull up Zappies on this current account because I am not in Arena 11, but let's just talk about them for a second. Basically, what they do is they don't do much damage, but they have this insane stun effect because there's 3 of them. It's like a little mini zap each time that they attack. So they shoot out their little zaps and they interrupt stuff. So the fact that they now target air, because before they only targeted ground, so when it says targets ground and air, basically that means that they now can attack air units too. So the fact that they now target air gives them a huge buff against Inferno Dragon. That's the biggest buff that they have, is against Inferno Dragon. I mean, don't get me wrong. They definitely are powerful against any air unit now. I mean, not necessarily powerful, but much more viable. You know, you can use them to kill Lava Hound or Baby Dragon or, you know, minions or whatever now. They'll probably be great against minions, actually. But they're best against this Inferno Dragon. Why is that? Because any Inferno unit, you know, Inferno Dragon or Inferno Tower, or any unit that charges up at that, is directly countered by any sort of a stun. The Inferno Dragon, you know, he shoots a focus beam of fire is what they call it. So basically he starts really weak, it increases in damage over time. So he only does like 33 damage per second. If you look at his starting damage, it says 33 to 385 at this level. At tournament standard level, it's 30 to 350. That's a little bit easier number to work with, or easier numbers to work with. So he starts weak, does more damage over time. Now, as he's channeling, as he's building up that Inferno Fiery Beam, you can interrupt that. And it resets, so it sets him back down from, let's say he's currently at like 100 or 200 damage per second, and your big tank, your golem, your giant is getting annihilated. Now you zap him, or in this case you use your Zappies against him, and that resets his charge. And it also takes a second for him to start charging up again. And then that charge starts at minimum damage, and it takes him a while to get back up to maximum damage before he can actually kill your tank. And you know, that often buys you a good amount of time. Now if you got those 3 Zappies in the back, they'll be permanently doing that basically. If they can get locked onto an Inferno Dragon or an Inferno Tower and your opponent doesn't do anything about them, then they'll just be constantly stunning it. Alright, next card is the Hunter. Range goes from 5 to 4, bullet spread is slightly smaller. The projectile range remains at 6.5. Now that's a little bit confusing. I feel like they definitely could have been much more clear with that description, but hey, it is what it is, and that's what I'm here for, is to help you guys out with this and help you understand it. Here comes the English nerd trying to, you know, explain these words that they use. Alright, anyway, enough talking about myself. What exactly does this mean? Well, the projectile range stays the same. So, he's got a range of, what is his range here? 5. Projectile range is 6.5. So the range that's now 5 is going to go down to 4. He shoots in an arc, kind of like a cone, you know, kind of like this shape, like a V. So that cone is going to go from this down to this. So, you know, at first glance that sounds like, okay, it's a nerf. They're reducing his range, right? Well, not exactly. What exactly does this guy do? Well, he does more damage the closer he is. The way that he works is he shoots out 10 bullets. At tournament standard level, let's go ahead and look at him. Here we go. Tournament standard level, 31 damage per second times 10. Damage is 69 times 10. So let's look at his actual damage, not his damage per second. So 69 times 10 is 690 damage. That's really powerful. That's almost 700 damage. So it's really strong. But that's from all 10 of his bullets, if all 10 hit. So if he's really close range, all 10 of those bullets will hit the opponent, or the enemy troop, or the enemy tower, or whatever it is, and do full, you know, almost 700 damage. But if he shoots from afar, all those bullets spread out and shoot all over the place, and they'll hit all kinds of different things, or just completely miss. So he's not very good at range, he's not very good at taking out towers, but he's great at countering stuff. He's great at big health units, because he does really powerful damage close range. He's not too strong health-wise, though. He doesn't take much to kill. So what they're doing is they're reducing that cone so that his bullets are more focused. So I think that that's kind of going to give him a buff at minimum, not minimum range, but medium range rather. At minimum range, obviously, you know, it's always going to hit. You know, you're always going to hit all 10 bullets on their giant or their hog or whatever you're trying to counter. But at far away, only a few of them will hit. In the middle, however, let's say, depending how far they are, 3 or 4, maybe 5 will hit. If that cone is a little bit smaller, those bullets are more focused in a smaller area. So in that kind of middle range there, more bullets are likely to hit the same unit, or to hit their clump of units. Thus, it'll give it a damage increase. So I think this is definitely going to be a buff to the Hunter. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to our next card here. Well, these two go hand in hand. Night Witch and Bats. Night Witch, if you've been playing this game for, you know, not too long now, since Night Witch was released, you'll know that she was super OP when she first dropped. Like, super strong. It was insane. She did so much damage. She spawned 1 million bats. She spawned them so quickly. She spawned so many on death. They nerfed her. She was still OP. They nerfed her again. She was still OP. I think they nerfed her at least 3 times by now, if not more by now. So what they're doing here is they're making bats who go hand in hand with her, because she spawns bats in the way that the regular witch, or the day witch as somebody on Reddit called it, spawns skeletons. They want to nerf those bats. I'm not sure why. They buffed them initially. Bats went from going to 4 bats for 2 cost to going to 5 bats for 2 cost elixir. So that gives them a direct buff. But in this case, their hit speed is going from 1 second to 1.1 second. So they attack slightly slower. Just basically, that results in a slight DPS reduction. The Night Witch initial bats spawn quicker. That's basically to counteract the nerf of the bats. They don't really want to buff the Night Witch or nerf the Night Witch. They kind of like where she's at right now. They want to keep her at about the same pace. But obviously, if they buff her little babies, her little minions, her little bats, right? I'm sorry, nerf them, then she's going to get nerfed as well. You know, indirectly or directly, however you want to look at it. So they counterbalance that. Alright, next thing that we have here to look at is the Goblin Hut. So let's go back to our deck screen here. Okay. So here's your Night Witch. You can see at tournament level standard, there's her regular stats. So she's just going to spawn bats a little bit quicker. And here's our bats as well. We can take a quick glance at them. Here's them at tournament level standard. The next thing that we're looking at, as I just said, is going to be the Goblin Hut. So here's the Goblin Hut. So what they're doing for the Goblin Hut is they are making it have a slightly increased spawn speed. So it initially, or before the buff, or right now actually at this point, I keep calling it the buff, sorry, before the nerf that's going to happen tomorrow, it will spawn at 4.9 seconds. As of tomorrow, it'll spawn at 5 seconds. So that's 1 less spawn in the long run. That means that's 1 less goblin. Now, Goblin Hut saw a huge resurgence in the last balance change. It was kind of weak before that. Now it's found its way into hog decks and beatdown decks and all kinds of decks. Spawner decks. I've seen a lot of Goblin Hut and furnace decks go hand in hand. Because those spear goblins got like an attack speed increase or something like that. So, you know, you're seeing it all over the place. So that being said, that's usually one of the things that gives them the idea, gives the Supercell team, you know, the Clash Royale makers, the idea that this card needs to be nerfed. It has a really high usage rate and a really high win rate. So Goblin Hut is definitely going to be nerfed. Okay. I don't think it'll be a big nerf, honestly, but, you know, we'll see how things play out. Give the meta like a couple weeks to play out and see how things go. And, you know, I guess we'll let the, what do we call it? The masses decide, right? The horde, the crowd. Okay, next card. Let's take a look here. Mini P.E.K.K.A and Lumberjack. Now, these units also kind of go hand in hand because they're very similar. They're both getting a hit point increase of 7%. So, they're going to be slightly more tanky. Now that's interesting. Both of these cards have decent usage and win rates, but they're not very high. They're not bottom of the barrel, but they're definitely subpar. I don't even want to say subpar, but they're lower or mid to lower tier as far as usage and win rates go. Not a lot of people like to play them for one reason or another, mostly because there's a lot of alternatives that cost a similar amount of elixir that might play a better job. You know, you see E-Barbs and stuff like that everywhere. You got Mega Knight, E-Wiz, all kinds of counter cards like that. So, I read something interesting on Reddit, which I just started using because of Clash Royale. This guy said, Lumberjack will survive 1 extra hit from the tower and 1 extra hit from elite barbs. So at the same level, Lumberjack will now be able to counter elite barbs. Obviously, most of the time you won't see elite barbs at the same level as the Lumberjack, because that would be level 9 elite barbs to level 1 Lumberjack, or level 13 elite barbs to level 5 Lumberjack at max level. You don't see elite barbs a lot anywhere other than really high level in medium or lower ladder. You know, you'll see like level 12 or 13 elite barbs at like 3k or something like that, you know? Because they're super strong at that level if they're leveled up. But at an equal level to other cards, they're not that great. So this interaction doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot because you're not going to see this interaction a whole lot, but it's still good to know. Lumberjack will supposedly be able to counter elite barbs. You never know. You might run into them in the Grand Challenge or something like that. Alright, Mini P.E.K.K.A will survive on an extra hit from the tower. Now that's significant to know for both of them. You know, they're just a little bit beefier. You know, maybe they'll survive a couple extra stabs from goblins, or spears from spear goblins, or little chip-aways from the bats. What do they do? Bite them? I think the bats, like, bite them. Okay, survive a couple extra bites from the bats. The tower, it'll survive 1 extra hit. And according to this guy, Mini P.E.K.K.A will survive 1 extra hit from the Executioner. Now that's an interesting card interaction. Not something that I generally would have thought of or thought to compare. But, you know, maybe that means that it'll survive an extra hit from something like the Musketeer, or maybe even like the Wizard. Definitely from something a little bit weaker like the Ice Wizard. Somebody else can do the math for me, because I majored in English and I'm terrible at math. Let me know in the comments if you have any other card interactions that would fill in right around here. Okay, let's go back to our balance changes here. The last card that we're going to look at today is the Mortar. Now this is a very interesting change. It's a tweak. Is it a buff? Is it a nerf? My head's itchy. Am I just thinking? I'm not too sure. But its minimum range is reduced from 4.5 to 3.5. So let's look at the Mortar directly here on my screen. Let me pull it up here 1 second. Switch back over. There we go. Mortar, defensive building, shoots with long range. So, you know, it's one of 2 siege buildings, 2 siege cards in the entire game, which would be the Mortar and the X-Bow. The minimum range is being reduced. What does that mean? Well, Mortar has a minimum range. It can only shoot things that are, you know, a certain distance away from it. So that being said, that means it'll ignore things that are relatively close to it. At this point, it's anything that's within 4.5. So range is 11.5. It doesn't tell you the minimum range here. That's pretty lame. Okay, cannot shoot at targets that get very close. It does say that. So anyway, we know the minimum range is now 4.5. It's going to be reduced to 3.5. So let's say that you play a Mortar. Your opponent plays a Knight at the bridge. Before, the Mortar might completely ignore that Knight, right? And just run back over. I'm sorry. The Knight will run towards the Mortar, but the Mortar will ignore the Knight and just start shooting the opponent's tower, right? Their princess tower. But depending on the placement now, if your opponent places a Knight and it's within the range, the now reduced minimum range of the Mortar, your Mortar is going to be more easily distracted by the Knight. Now, the best way to counter a Mortar is with like a Knight or an Ice Golem, some cheap mini tank like that. And basically, when they place a Mortar at the bridge, you place your mini tank kind of in the center of the opposite side of the map. So if they place their Mortar on the top right, you place your, it's on the other side here, it's going to be looking like the top left for you guys. Okay, top right, then you place your Mortar or your Knight on the bottom left here, and you know, he kind of just keeps getting distracted. That Mortar keeps getting distracted and shooting it. So this minimum range doesn't directly affect that interaction, but it will create a lot of new interactions because the Mortar will be much more easily distracted. I'm excited to see how that plays out. I don't play Mortar a lot. You know, I'm not too into it. Siege is kind of cool. I play it from time to time. I have it leveled up on this account. You can see it's level 11, which is decent for this level. But it's just not for me. You know, it's kind of like the Lava Hound, which for some reason is the unit that I forgot to talk about. So let's talk about that next. So the Lava Hound, can I pull it up on this screen here? Well, let's look at his buff first. He's receiving a 5% increase in his hit points. So his health pool is going up by 5%. Somebody can do the math for me again. Do whatever his hit pool is here. Hit point pool is here. Let's look at him, Lava Hound. 3,000 times 0.05. Get out your cell phone, students, and do it on your calculator, whatever you got. It should be easy, but I'm not even going to try to do it in my head right now, because I would just get distracted. Anyway, what is he doing? Well, he's getting buffed. He's getting a health increase. So the Lava Hound, I don't play him a lot. I have him as a level 3 on my main account. He's my first and only level 3 legendary. So I played him a little bit on ladder, but, you know, I just ended up reverting back to my, you know, Hog Tornado Cycle deck that I really like, which I showcased in another video, because I was just much more comfortable with that. He felt kind of underpowered. He definitely had lower usage and win rates in the current meta. He was really good before, but they just kept coming out with more and more cards to counter him, namely Executioner. Executioner was a huge, and still is a huge counter card to the Lava Hound. So the Lava Hound is going to increase his hit point pool by 5%. make him a little bit tankier, and that's all he really does is tank. I mean, he does a decent little bit of damage if you leave him alone, but he's mostly a big air tank to support really powerful air units like the balloon. Lava Loon is huge. It's a huge archetype, one that I talked about in my terminology video. So he's great with air decks. He's great as a tank for all kinds of stuff. You know, put a wizard or an executioner behind him, but you mostly see him paired with a balloon and things like Mega Minion, Minion Horde, Inferno Dragon, Baby Dragon, all those air units. You know, all these air armies. For some reason, people love Tombstone with Lava Hound. I don't know what the exact allure is, but I see it in a lot of decks. I tried running it. It's decent. Personally, I would rather run a Tornado, but it doesn't seem to do the job quite as well. Go ahead and fill me in the comments if you think you know why exactly Tombstone always tends to fit into Lava Loon decks. So I'm excited about that update. You know, maybe I'll be playing the Lava Loon a little bit more, or the Lava Hound in general. Maybe I'll craft a cool funky deck with like my Executioner or my Ice Wizard and Tornado with a Lava Hound. Who knows? I'll have some fun with it. So that concludes today's video. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch. I really appreciate it. Have a good afternoon, have a good morning, have a good night. I guess it depends on when you're watching this. And enjoy those balance changes.